Welcome to the Greek Underworld. Not in a dramatic, you have died and must now face judgment kind of way. More like, you've pressed play on a strange little story, and now you're drifting gently downward into a world that ancient poets only whispered about. A world that begins beneath your feet, under the roots of the earth, and wins slowly into darkness. But it's not scary here. Not really. It's quiet, soft, dusty, like an old library beneath the world, where the books are made of bones and the shelves are carved from time itself. This is not the land of the living. This is the Greek Underworld. And tonight, you and I are going to explore it. Because the underworld wasn't just some vague idea to the Greeks. It wasn't a punishment zone or a hellfire pit. It was an entire landscape, a full civilization of the dead, one with rivers, roads, judges, kings, meadows, monsters, and rules. And honestly, it's kind of beautiful. Not in the sunny, floral kind of way, but in the way an ancient cave painting is beautiful, or a lullaby about ghosts. There's something oddly comforting about how thoroughly the Greeks imagined death, and what came after. In this video, we'll travel through it all, from the cracks in the earth where the journey begins, to the 5 rivers that divide the realms, to the ghostly plains of Asphodel and the pit of Tartarus, where punishments echo for eternity. We'll meet the rulers, Hades, Persephone, the 3 silent judges, and walk alongside famous souls like Sisyphus, Orpheus, and the ever-thirsty Tantalus. And by the time we're done, you'll know how the Greek underworld worked, not just as a myth, but as a map of meaning, a way the ancients made sense of endings, and maybe even a few beginnings. So if you enjoy falling asleep to strange myths and soft voices, consider leaving a like or dropping a comment with your favorite underworld myth. And if you'd like to explore more ancient worlds with me, feel free to subscribe. It helps more people find these sleepy stories and keeps the underworld a little more crowded, in a good way. All right, get comfortable. Let your breathing slow. Let your thoughts sink gently downward, like stones through dark water. Because our descent is about to begin, and the dead are waiting. It always begins with a crack, not a dramatic earthquake, nor a sudden chasm splitting the earth in half. Just a fissure, a thin seam in the world, a place where the stone feels thinner, where the wind seems to hum a lower note, and where your feet feel strangely heavy, like they already know they shouldn't linger. The Greeks believed that the way into the underworld wasn't one singular tunnel, but many, dozens, maybe hundreds of cracks scattered across the mortal world, deep caves, bottomless pits, natural fissures in the rocks where the gods had peeled back the earth like the rind of an overripe pomegranate. One of the most famous, of course, was the Cape Tainaron, a shadowy cave at the southern tip of the Peloponnese. Wind-blasted and sharp with salt, it was considered one of the most literal doorways to the realm of the dead. Sailors didn't like to linger near it. Neither did birds. It wasn't haunted, exactly. Just avoided, revered in a way only something deeply feared can be. And yet, the cracks weren't just physical places. They were moments, times of crossing. The Greeks knew that the border between life and death didn't need to be a dramatic rift. It could be a whisper, a last breath, a dream that lingers too long. These were the first steps, the surface markers, the warning signs. And if you kept going, the cracks became corridors, and those corridors led to rivers. There are rivers in the underworld, 5 of them. And no, they're not metaphorical. The The Greeks spoke of these rivers not just as symbols of death, but as actual geographies of it, each with a purpose, each with a personality. First, there's the Styx, the black river of oaths, the most famous one. Not just a river, but a boundary, a divine line you didn't cross lightly. Even the gods swore by it. And if they lied, they fell into a coma for a year. Eternal truths carried on inky waters. Then comes the Acheron, the river of woe. This is the one souls were ferried across. A sluggish, mournful thing, grey and slow-moving. The kind of river that never reflects the light. It doesn't rage, it weeps. Next, the Lethe, the river of forgetting. Drink from it, and all memories fade. It was mercy, in a way, or punishment. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Some souls drank so they wouldn't remember their lives. Others drank so they could be reborn, blank and clean. Phlegethon follows, the river of fire. Yes, fire. Not metaphorical fire, either. The poets described it as literal flames flowing like water, a burning stream winding through the depths. Think lava lamp, but divine. It didn't burn the body, it burned the soul. And finally, Cocytus, the river of wailing. Even the name sounds like a cry. A cold, frozen river, often associated with punishment and the damned. Not the one you wanted to float near. Each river served a role, a boundary, a test, a mirror, and somehow they all flowed together. If the rivers were the circulatory system of the underworld, then the gates were its teeth. There were many rumored gates, some grand, some hidden, some guarded by creatures you really didn't want to meet in a dark alley, or any alley, for that matter. The most iconic of these guardians, Cerberus. Yes, the three-headed dog. But Cerberus wasn't some bloodthirsty hellhound tearing apart anyone who dared enter. He was more of a cosmic bouncer. His job was to make sure souls didn't leave, not to stop you from getting in. Mortals, frankly, were more than capable of walking straight in. It was getting out that was the problem. Some gates were mythically literal, like the cave at Tyneron, or the great stone archways in the tales of Orpheus. Others were more spiritual, visions seen by mystics, thresholds in the Eleusinian mysteries, portals in dreams, hidden doorways in the soul. No matter the path, there was always a sense of crossing, a line drawn, then stepped over. And once across, the world changed. Light faded, time thinned. You were no longer in the realm of breath. After the gates, there is quiet. Not silence as in peaceful, but silence as in total. The kind that wraps around your bones. A silence that feels older than language. This is the shore of the Acheron. Here, the newly dead gather. Or rather, drift. Souls that look more like shadows than people. No eyes. No voices. Just shapes. Pale and flickering, like candle smoke. They don't speak. They don't scream. They wait. For who? For Charon, of course. The ferryman. Old, silent, hooded, probably cranky, definitely underpaid. He rows the boat back and forth across the river, collecting coins and carrying souls. But only if you had the fare. One obol. That's all it took. Tucked into the mouth of the dead, left by loved ones. If you were lucky, and if you weren't, you waited. For 100 years, wandering the shore, forgotten. The shore of Acheron wasn't hell, it was bureaucracy. and nothing drags on like ghostly paperwork. Once ferried across, you'd find yourself not in flames or paradise, but in a vast, neutral plain, the Asphodel meadows, a grey field stretching endlessly, not beautiful, not cruel, just there. Souls wandered like sleepwalkers, not tortured, not joyous, just remembering or forgetting. The Greeks imagined the majority of the dead came here, not heroes, not villains, just people, farmers, bakers, potters, poets, people whose lives were neither great nor terrible. It wasn't a punishment. It wasn't a reward. It was default. Occasionally, you might glimpse something stranger in the distance, a flicker of light from Elysium, a deeper dark from Tartarus. But here in the meadows, the afterlife was mild, soft, whispering, a perfect place to end a story, or to fall asleep. Your first companion after death is not who you might expect. He's not terrifying, not cloaked in shadows, no bony fingers or scythes, no thunder, no fanfare, just a man with winged sandals, Hermes, messenger of the gods, patron of travelers, thieves, and, unexpectedly, souls of the dead. The Greeks called him Psychopompos, meaning soul guide. And when your last breath left your lips, it was Hermes who arrived, not with judgment, but with silence, with respect, with speed, sometimes with a bit of flair. He didn't judge, he didn't scold, he simply escorted. Picture him walking beside you down a narrow twilight path, crumbling leaves underfoot, the air thinning, the birds growing quiet. He may hum, he may walk in silence. Occasionally he might even glance sideways and offer a dry joke. Hermes wasn't solemn by nature, but this was his sacred task, to carry souls safely from the world of the living into the land of the dead. And once the gates of the underworld loomed near, he would leave you, not cruelly, not hurriedly, just respectfully, because the next part of your journey, that was not for him to decide. Once inside, it's time to be judged, but not by one all-powerful figure on a fiery throne. No thunder, no divine gavel. Instead, the Greeks offered you 3 judges, all once human, all once mortal kings. Now, eternal bureaucrats in the afterlife. Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, each with their own domain. Minos, the most famous, fair and calculating. Rhadamanthus, severe and incorruptible. Aeacus, the oldest, tasked with guarding the keys of Hades and judging souls from Europe. They didn't yell, they didn't posture, they listened. Your life was laid before them, not in speeches, but in memory, in essence, in the weight of your choices. Were you brave? Were you cruel? Did you lie? Did you love? It wasn't about worship. It wasn't about wealth. The Greeks had a refreshingly human view of morality. The good and the terrible could be neighbors in death. Together, the judges would confer, and then, quietly, simply, they would point, left, right, or straight ahead, to punishment, to reward, or to the long grey fields of forgetfulness. The choice wasn't yours anymore, but the life you lived, that had been. Unlike the Egyptians, the Greeks didn't place your heart on a literal scale against a feather, but they did believe your soul carried weight, not physical weight, but moral gravity. Your life's choices clung to you like mist, They couldn't be scrubbed clean, not even by death. There was no checklist, no commandments, just memory, reflection, regret, pride, and perhaps a little luck. Some believed that how you died mattered. Others thought it was how you lived. Most assumed it was both, and that the dead revealed their true shape in the underworld. Some arrived looking the same as in life. Others changed, warped, diminished, as if the soul couldn't lie once freed from the body. And in this truth, this raw, flickering truth, the judges saw everything they needed to know. You couldn't argue, you couldn't plead, you just stood and were seen. Strangely enough, not every soul had to be judged. In some stories, particularly those whispered through the Orphic mysteries, certain souls chose their path. They came to a crossroads deep within the underworld. 3 roads, no signs, no explanations, only instinct. To the left, punishment. To the right, paradise. Straight ahead, the long, forgetful drift. But how could you choose if you didn't know where they led? Maybe that was the point. These stories imagined the soul as already shaped, drawn to the path it deserved. Not because someone told it so, but because, deep down, it knew. The crossroads was not a test, it was a mirror, and the soul walked not where it wanted to go, but where it belonged. Now, let's rewind for a moment, because none of this, Hermes, the judges, the crossroads, none of it starts unless you make it across the river. And to do that, you need to pay the boatman. Charon, grizzled, grey, hooded, somewhere between ancient sea captain and eternally disappointed librarian. He didn't care who you were in life. He cared about one thing. Did you bring a coin? A simple obol, tucked in your mouth, placed by loved ones. A token of respect, a passport of sorts. If you had it, he ferried you across Acheron. If you didn't, you waited for 100 years. And even then, the crossing was bitter, shameful, a warning to the living. Honor your dead, prepare them, or they will wander. Some tried to cheat the system, sneak aboard, trick the boatman. It never ended well. Charon was many things, but not easily fooled. And his boat never turned around. If you were average, neither a villain nor a hero, you came here. The Asphodel meadows were not a place of torture nor of joy. They were neutral, soft, endless, dreamlike. A grey plain of ghostly grasses that rustled in windless air. Fields where the dead wandered aimlessly, like faded memories of themselves. To the Greeks, this was the default setting for most of humanity. Not everyone gets glory. Not everyone commits unforgivable crimes. Most simply live and die. Souls here didn't scream. They didn't rejoice. They drifted. And over time, they began to forget. Not because of punishment, but because time itself has a way of erasing detail when you no longer have a heartbeat to mark its passing. Imagine a field where every soul you've ever read about in an obituary gently glides by. Quiet farmers, retired soldiers, teachers, midwives, people who mattered, but only for a moment. Now, part of the great soft hum of the dead. It was peaceful, it was eerie, it was eternity. But if you were cruel in life, arrogant, violent, or hubristic, you didn't get meadows. You got the fields of punishment. Somewhere in the underworld, beyond the rivers and before the true abyss of Tartarus, was a scorched and broken land. Not fire and brimstone, something more personal. A landscape of punishment tailored to the soul. The Greeks were experts in poetic justice. If you defied the gods, your fate would mirror your offense. Sisyphus, for example, he cheated death twice, thought himself clever, tricked the gods. So they gave him an eternal task: roll a boulder uphill, only for it to fall back down, forever. Tantalus, who killed his son and served him as stew to the gods, was doomed to stand in a pool of water beneath a fruit tree, forever hungry, forever thirsty, and always just out of reach. This was not random suffering. It was crafted irony, a punishment that echoed your life and made you relive it. The Greeks didn't believe in blind wrath. They believed in consequences, designed, sharp, perfect. But not all souls wandered, and not all were punished. If you were brave, noble, kind, a true hero in the eyes of gods and mortals alike, you went to the Elysian fields. And Elysium was different. It had color. Golden light bathed the fields. Gentle breezes whispered through trees that never lost their leaves. Music drifted through the air like perfume. And laughter, not echoing madness, but true, warm laughter, could be heard. Here lived the souls of those favored by the gods, philosophers, poets, heroes, not just because of fame, but because of virtue. And in some tellings, souls could choose to be reborn, live again, and if, after 3 lives, they remained pure, they would graduate to something even higher, rarely spoken of, even more rarely achieved. Beyond Elysium, if you lived 3 good lives, each more virtuous than the last, you could reach the Isles of the Blessed. Here, the soul was perfected, enlightened, beyond suffering, beyond rebirth. It wasn't a place for legends. It was a place for the best of the best. Achilles, some say, was offered a place here. Some say he refused. Others say he simply missed the living world too much to stay. Unlike Elysium, which was accessible to any truly noble soul, the Isles were for those who chose goodness again and again. Across lifetimes, across fates, the ultimate reward in Greek afterlife mythology wasn't pleasure, it was peace. And now, we look down. Below all of this, deeper than punishment, past the rivers, beneath even the roots of the underworld itself, lay Tartarus. It wasn't a realm of the dead, not exactly. It was a prison, a divine oubliette. Here were kept the ancient threats, the titans who defied Olympus, Typhon, the storm monster who once nearly overthrew Zeus, Campe, Echidna, even some mortal kings too monstrous for normal damnation. This was not a place where souls wandered. This was a vault. The pit was described as tenfold as far below earth as the heavens were above it, an unfathomable descent into blackness. Nothing escaped, nothing moved. Even gods feared Tartarus. It was not judgment, it was containment, a reminder that even the immortal are not untouchable. Let's clear something up right away. Hades was not the Greek devil. He didn't tempt souls. He didn't delight in pain. He didn't wear red. And he didn't laugh maniacally from a throne made of fire. He was a middle manager, a divine administrator, the most responsible of all the gods. When the world was divided after the fall of the Titans, Zeus took the sky, Poseidon took the sea, and Hades, he drew the short straw, the underworld, not by choice, but by necessity. And once there, he ruled it quietly, with structure, with routine, with a certain grim dignity. He kept the dead in, kept the living out, and maintained order better than any of his flashier siblings ever could. He was not warm, he was not friendly, but he was fair. His name wasn't even said lightly. It became synonymous with the land itself. The underworld was often just called Hades because he was the underworld. And unlike Zeus, Hades didn't cheat constantly. He wasn't dramatic like Poseidon. He didn't start wars or meddle in mortal politics. He ruled the one domain no one else wanted, and did so with patience. And frankly, that deserves more respect than thunderbolts ever did. If Hades was the reluctant king, Persephone was the reluctant queen. Her story is perhaps one of the most famous in Greek mythology, and one of the most misunderstood. She was the daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest. Bright, curious, wild as springtime, and one day, while picking flowers in a field, the ground opened beneath her. Hades took her, kidnapped her in many versions, invited her in some. The myths are not always clear, but what they all agree on is this. She ate 6 pomegranate seeds while in the underworld, and because of that, she could never fully leave. So a bargain was struck. Persephone would spend 6 months below with Hades, ruling the dead as queen, and 6 months above, with her mother, bringing spring back to the world. When she returned each year, flowers bloomed, crops grew, the world felt alive again. When she left, everything withered and winter came. But over time, Persephone changed. She was no longer the innocent girl who picked flowers. She became a queen, a goddess of death and rebirth, one who moved between worlds with calm command, not a victim, but a balance. You might think the underworld is full of wailing and chaos, but it's actually heavily supervised. Enter the Furies, ancient spirits of vengeance and justice, older than the Olympians, and very, very serious about rules. If someone committed a grave crime, murdering family, breaking oaths, defying fate, the Furies followed, relentlessly. They didn't punish the crime, they punished the guilt. They were less monsters and more living consequences. Their names: Alecto, endless; Tisiphone, avenger; and Megara, grudging. They were said to have snakes for hair, eyes that dripped blood, and voices that shattered sanity. But mostly they were keepers of justice when mortal courts failed. And in the underworld, they didn't scream. They watched. They remembered. They whispered to the judges. They whispered to you. You could not lie to the Furies. And you couldn't run from them either. They were always there, just behind you. So, what exactly is a soul? The Greeks didn't think of it as a glowing orb or winged spirit. A soul, called a shade, was more like a shadow, a faded memory of a person, lacking weight, lacking warmth, but still, them. They didn't speak often. Some couldn't. The longer they lingered, the more details they lost. Face, name, identity. They drifted in meadows or stood by the shores of Lethe. They clung to memories like dried petals. Some were peaceful, others restless. Some cried out to be remembered, others longed to forget. In Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus visits the underworld and meets the shade of his mother. She tries to embrace him, but he passes right through her. That's the tragic poetry of the Greek soul. Not damned, not redeemed, just unreachable. It wasn't about flames, it was about fading, and the saddest fate of all, to be forgotten. Let's begin with a man who thought he was smarter than death. Sisyphus, king of Ephyra, now known as Corinth, was clever, too clever. He broke oaths, he tricked gods. He even chained up Thanatos, the personification of death, so that no one could die. For a brief moment, the world became immortal and deeply, deeply chaotic. When death was finally restored, the gods decided they'd had enough. His punishment? He was sent to the underworld and tasked with one single, endlessly useless task. Roll a boulder up a hill, a huge, heavy boulder. Heave it up, inch by inch. Strain, sweat, nearly reach the top. And then it rolls back down, forever, every time. No rest, no progress, just endless repetition. It wasn't torture through pain. It was torture through futility. And somehow, that makes it worse. Sisyphus became the patron saint of hopeless effort, the tragic comedy of trying too hard. His story still echoes today, every time we reload a printer, or answer an email we just answered yesterday. If Sisyphus is the king of effort, then Tantalus is the king of frustration. His crimes were impressive. He stole ambrosia from the gods. He lied. He betrayed divine trust. And in one particularly grim myth, he killed his own son, Pelops, cooked him into a stew, and served him at a banquet to the Olympians, just to see if they'd notice. Spoiler, they noticed. The gods were appalled, furious, and more importantly, they were creative. Tantalus was placed in a pool of clear, fresh water. Above his head, the most beautiful fruit trees you could imagine. Apples, pears, figs, ripe and shimmering. But the moment he reached down to drink, the water receded. And the moment he stretched up to eat, the branches pulled away. He was doomed to be eternally hungry and eternally thirsty, surrounded by everything he wanted, but unable to touch any of it. From his name, we get the word tantalize. It's not just denial. It's denial with a cruel sense of humor. Ixion was another mortal who really should have stopped while he was ahead. He was once a king, welcomed to Olympus, given the rarest of honors, a seat at the gods' table. And what did he do? He tried to seduce Hera, queen of the gods. In some versions, he actually boasted about it. In others, Zeus created a phantom cloud version of Hera to test him, and Ixion fell for it anyway. The punishment? Divine, inventive, horrifying. Ixion was bound to a flaming, spinning wheel, set in motion for eternity. He spun through the underworld, on fire, eyes open, never stopping. Some say the wheel was symbolic of the sun, always turning. Others say it was just punishment designed by an angry husband with a flair for drama. Either way, Ixion burns. Not for lust, not for ambition, but for arrogance, for forgetting that gratitude matters more than greed. Some souls were punished as a group. The Danaides were 50 sisters, daughters of Danaus. On their wedding night, all but one of them murdered their husbands, following their father's command. The one who refused. Her name was Hypermnestra, and she was spared punishment. The other 49, sent to the underworld with a peculiar task. Each was given a bottomless jar, a leaking vessel. Their punishment, fill it, endlessly. They'd carry water in jugs, pour it in, and watch it drain out again. Repeat and repeat and repeat. It was a punishment that mirrored their crime, betrayal of union, of partnership. So they were forced to work together in vain, forever failing, forever repeating the act of fruitless labor. They were not whipped, not burned, just stuck in a loop of nothing. Greek punishments were poetic that way. They didn't break your body, they broke your hope. And finally, a story not of punishment, but of almost success. Orpheus was the greatest musician in Greek myth. His lyre could charm birds from the sky, tame wild beasts, and yes, even soften the hearts of the gods. When his wife Eurydice died suddenly, he was devastated. So he did the unthinkable. He descended into the underworld, not with weapons, not with cunning, but with music. And it worked. His song was so beautiful that even Hades and Persephone were moved. They agreed to let Eurydice return to the land of the living. On one condition: Orpheus must walk ahead and not look back. Not once, not until they were both fully back in the sunlight. So he walked, slowly, listening for her footsteps, hearing them faintly behind him. And then, just before the threshold, he turned, for love, for fear, for longing. But he looked, and she vanished, back into the dark. His punishment was not given. It was chosen. Not eternal torment, just eternal regret. And so we rise again, not in a blaze of glory or with a triumphant soundtrack, just softly, quietly, like a soul crossing the riverbank in reverse, stepping back into the breath of the living. You've walked the full length of the underworld now, from the cracks in the earth, to the silent rivers, to the judges and the gatekeepers, to the wandering souls, the punished kings, the queens of shadow, and the strange, soft meadows where memories begin to fade. And through it all, the myths whispered, not to frighten you, not to convert you, just to remind you, the ancient Greeks didn't think of death as an ending. They thought of it as another kind of place, a mirror of life, a realm with rules and rivers, gates and gardens, regrets and redemptions. In the underworld, the greatest punishment wasn't fire or torment. It was futility, repetition, isolation, a soul untethered from memory. And the greatest reward, peace, stillness, a place to rest where the wind always smells like spring and your name is remembered by the ones you loved. Maybe that's what these stories are really about. Not just what happens when we die, but how we live while we're here, with kindness, with courage, with enough curiosity to wonder what might lie beneath the surface, but not so much that we forget to appreciate the sunlight above. So now, it's time to rest. Let your shoulders drop. Let your thoughts slow. Let your mind settle like dust in an ancient temple, undisturbed, sacred, still. Because the stars are still there. The myths will wait. And even Sisyphus, in the end, found rhythm in the repetition. And if tonight's story brought you any piece of your own, whether in myth, in metaphor, or just in the background of your sleep, I'm deeply grateful. If you'd like to hear more mythological dreams spun into bedtime tales, consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel. It helps these stories wander farther, and it helps me keep the lantern lit. Until next time, sleep well, and may your dreams drift gently.